He built the code that saved a billion-dollar Mars mission. But when it worked, they gave the credit to his white teammate. Now he's locked out of the system he created. His name erased. His badge disabled. But when the mission starts to fail live on global broadcast, there's only one line of code that can save it. And it's buried in his algorithm. What happens when the only person who can save them is the one they tried to erase? Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The first time Malik Dawson walked through the double glass doors of NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, hum of brilliance filled the air. Scientists in white coats buzzed past with clipboards and earpieces. Massive digital displays blinked with data points, orbital paths, and countdown clocks. He paused for just a second to soak it all in. The place he had dreamed of since he was 10 years old. Watching rocket launches with his father in their cramped Atlanta apartment. But that moment of awe was brief. The receptionist didn't look up when he said his name. She slid a visitor's badge across the counter without a smile. When he asked where to report for orientation, she hesitated before saying, custodial? Her brows furrowed as she scanned his hoodie and jeans, standard for a long flight, but apparently enough to place him in the wrong department. I'm the aerospace intern, Malik said, calm but firm. There was a beat of silence before she cleared her throat, corrected herself with an awkward chuckle, and pointed him down the hall. The first cut came clean, not sharp enough to sting, but deep enough to remember. Orientation was a blur of sterile rooms and monotonous policies. He noticed how the other interns clustered quickly, laughing over shared schools and mutual professors. MIT, Caltech, Stanford. Malik, who graduated top of his class at Georgia Tech, got polite nods and quick glances but no real conversation. The first time someone spoke to him beyond a formality was when a white intern named Jared leaned over during a team assignment and asked, "So what program got you in? Was it like a diversity initiative or something?" Malik didn't answer. He just looked at the guy long enough for him to shift uncomfortably and look away. He knew that look, the one that measured him not by merit, but by optics. He saw it in the fake smiles of project managers, in the way senior engineers avoided eye contact during briefings, and how his badge was always double-checked when entering secure areas, unlike the others. Assigned to the Telemetry and Systems Integrity Division, Malik had expected hands-on work, collaboration, and mentorship. Instead, he was handed a bulky manual, a second-hand laptop, and a cubicle next to the server closet. His first assignment? Organizing decades-old telemetry logs, data from missions long past their historical significance. It wasn't just grunt work. It was dismissal wrapped in bureaucracy. He didn't complain, not once. He showed up early, left late, and spent his evenings writing custom scripts to streamline the outdated software they still used. No one asked him to, and no one noticed. But he did it anyway, because Malik knew something they didn't. Excellence was the only language he had ever been allowed to speak. One afternoon, while delivering a printout to the lead engineer, Zach Harland, Malik walked into a heated discussion about the Mars orbiter simulations scheduled for the following week. Zach and two others were going over final trajectory calculations. Something about the numbers caught Malik's eye. The decimal placement in the atmospheric entry vectors seemed off. He didn't speak up immediately. Instead, he took a printed copy from the discard pile and spent that night checking it line by line. His suspicion hardened into certainty. The trajectory algorithm had been based on a flawed constant, a miscalculation that if left uncorrected would cause the lander to enter too steeply and disintegrate on atmospheric contact. He didn't sleep that night. The next morning he printed his findings, annotated with sources and simulations, and walked them directly to Zach's desk. Zach was mid-conversation, laughing with a group of senior engineers. Malik waited silently, papers in hand. Finally Zach looked over. His smile dropped slightly. "I found a potential issue with the orbiter's re-entry constants," Malik said carefully. "I cross-referenced with previous Mars simulations." Zach didn't let him finish. He leaned back, arms crossed, eyes flicking to the report in Malik's hands like it was a fast food receipt. "I'm sure it's nothing," he said, almost bored. "The math was double-checked already. Thanks though." Malik pressed on. "If it's incorrect, the descent angle." Zach held up a hand. "I said it's fine." He didn't even take the paper. The others around Zach avoided looking at Malik, their silence thick with complicity. One even chuckled under his breath. Malik stood there, still holding the report. For a second he thought about forcing the issue, raising his voice, demanding to be heard. But the room had already judged him, and nothing he said would be interpreted as contribution. Only confrontation. So he walked back to his cubicle, jaw tight, and placed the paper in his drawer. And that's when he saw it on his screen. An internal memo misrouted to him by accident. Still open, it was a performance note about the internship cohort. One line stood out, buried halfway down. Dawson, admitted via DAA. Monitor for retention issues. Limited technical collaboration expected. It wasn't just whispers anymore. It was documented, systematized, and baked into how they saw him. But Malik wasn't broken. Not yet. He stared at that line, his heart pounding, not with fear but with focus. He clicked out of the memo, pulled up the simulation software again, and began writing a script to test his hypothesis one more time. As Malik reruns the simulation late that night, the numbers confirm it. The mission's descent path is catastrophically flawed. He grabs the printed results, rushes back to Zach's office, and slips them under the door. The next morning, the mission is still moving forward, unchanged. His report never even made it into the meeting. The morning after Malik slid his report under Zach's door, the lab was humming with quiet urgency. Technicians moved faster, eyes on clipboards, voices tight. Malik arrived early, as usual, and took his seat unnoticed. The room buzzed with preparation for the full system simulation of the Mars orbiter descent, an event months in planning, and now only days away from the live launch phase. He waited to be called into the meeting, where the critical fix he submitted would surely be discussed. But the invite never came. At 9:02 a.m., the team filed into the glass conference room, adjacent to his cubicle. Zach was leading, gesturing confidently at a 3D render on the screen. Malik couldn't hear the words, but he recognized the projection immediately. It was the exact path his correction was meant to alter. He stared, searching for signs the report had made it through. Nothing had changed. No one glanced at him through the glass. Not once. It was as if he didn't exist, just outside the door, invisible in plain sight. He turned back to his desk, opened his drawer, and took out the report. Still folded, still unread, still marked with the timestamp and his signature in the bottom corner. The only thing more dangerous than a mistake in mission code was the refusal to acknowledge one. That afternoon he wrote a clean, formal analysis of the simulation flaw, and emailed it directly to Zach. He CC'd 2 other senior engineers, just enough oversight to be noticed, but not so aggressive that it could be spun as insubordination. No one responded. Hours passed. Then a day. Still nothing. He refreshed his inbox every 10 minutes, fingers drumming on the desk. Around him, the atmosphere grew more confident. Everyone spoke as if the mission was already a success, laughing louder, walking with lighter steps. There was no room in their momentum for uncertainty, especially not from someone like him. That night, Malik skipped dinner. He stayed in the lab alone, running the descent scenario again, with his patched code. The new path was smoother, the stress load on the heat shield significantly reduced. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a solution. He stared at the screen until his vision blurred. Behind him, the janitor's mop squeaked across the floor. "You live here now," came a voice, warm but weathered. Malik turned. It was Reggie, the night shift custodian, probably in his late 50s, with a slow walk and a knowing stare. "Something like that," Malik muttered. Reggie eyed the screen. "That the mission thing? The Mars project?" Malik nodded. Reggie didn't ask what he was doing. He didn't need to. He'd seen enough young black interns in this building, walk in with dreams and leave with silence. "You know," Reggie said, leaning on his mop, "when they first started building this wing, I used to watch the engineers talk past this one brother. Same way they look at you. Smart cat, did everything right. They never listened. Till something exploded." Malik looked up. "What happened to him?" Reggie exhaled. "Got pushed out before they could pin it on him. Truth came out 2 years later, but by then he was gone. Went back to Louisiana. Teaches math now." Malik didn't respond. He didn't need to. The weight of the story settled between them. "Don't wait for him to clap for you, son," Reggie said. "They only do that after they bury you or steal your work." The mop squeaked again as Reggie walked away, leaving behind the sting of unwanted wisdom. The next morning, Malik opened his inbox expecting the usual silence. But there it was, a single-line reply from Zach. "Noted. We'll revisit this after the test sim." That was it. No acknowledgement of the flaw. No questions. No request for clarification. Just a placating sentence designed to sound professional while meaning nothing at all. By noon, the test simulation was in full swing. The team gathered in the control room, cheering as the lander's digital avatar began its descent toward the Martian surface. At first, everything looked stable. Then the angle began to steepen. "Why is the atmospheric drag spiking?" someone asked. Zach leaned forward. "That can't be right." The heat indicators turned red. The capsule's velocity crossed the critical threshold. Then it happened. The simulation failed. Catastrophically. A silence fell over the room as the virtual lander burned up on entry. On screen, the telemetry flatlined, just like Malik had predicted. No one spoke, no one celebrated, and no one looked his way. Instead, they blamed a sensor miscalibration, a glitch in the hardware emulation, everything except the real cause. Malik sat in his cubicle, frozen, watching through the glass. His chest tightened, not with vindication, but with the crushing knowledge that the truth didn't matter unless someone with power said it did. By the end of the day, an internal report was issued. It concluded that the failure was due to unexpected environmental variability in the simulation settings. An external audit would be conducted. The mission was still on track with minor recalibration. They buried it. His correction. His foresight. Ignored. That night, Malik opened his laptop and began documenting everything. Every email, every timestamp, every version of the code. He saved it to an encrypted drive. He didn't know what he'd do with it yet, but he knew he had to protect it, because if they could erase his voice once, they could do it again. The next day, he received an internal memo by mistake, likely routed to him because of similar initials in the email list. It was labeled Confidential Internship Performance Review. Malik scrolled down. There, next to his name, DI placement. Low retention likelihood. No collaboration concerns. No technical red flags. Minimal value add projected. He read it twice. No collaboration concerns. Minimal value add. They didn't just see him as unqualified. They saw him as disposable. And that's when he decided he wouldn't stay silent anymore. That evening, as Malik prepared to leave, a ping hit his inbox. An invitation to a private meeting with 2 senior engineers, scheduled for first thing tomorrow morning. The subject line, simulation report discrepancy. Urgent. Malik barely slept the night before the meeting. He kept replaying the simulation failure in his head, how it mirrored every line of his corrected analysis, how no one acknowledged it, how they let the silence win. But now someone had responded. Urgent, a glimmer of hope. Maybe this time they were ready to listen. The meeting room wasn't what he expected. It wasn't a conference space, no screen, no charts, just a windowless side room near the compliance office. 2 men were already seated when he arrived. Ben Lutz, a compact man with a clipped tone and a stiff blazer, and Emerson Cole, a senior systems director with decades of tenure and a reputation for being untouchable. Neither smiled when he entered. Ben motioned to the empty chair across from them. Emerson was the first to speak. "We reviewed your memo." Malik leaned forward, hopeful. "The trajectory correction. Yes, I saw the sim fail. It aligned exactly with." Ben cut him off. "Let's talk about the process you used to reach your conclusions." "Yes," Emerson said. "You're not assigned to the orbital algorithms team, so we're curious who assisted you in running the analysis." "No one," Malik replied. "I stayed late, reviewed the code paths, cross-referenced legacy entries with." Ben leaned back, eyebrows raised in mock surprise. "Impressive. For you." The room fell silent. Malik's throat tightened. He heard the words for what they were, disguised as compliment, soaked in condescension. "For you. Not impressive in general. Impressive for a black intern. For someone they'd already decided didn't belong." He sat up straighter. "I studied aerospace simulation for 3 years. I built a custom telemetry engine in undergrad. I didn't need help." Emerson cleared his throat. "We want to be sure that this independent analysis doesn't distract from your assigned tasks. There's a chain of command here. Innovation is welcome, but only when routed appropriately." Malik bit back his frustration. "So you're saying next time I see a flaw in the mission code, I should, what? Pretend I didn't?" Emerson gave a thin smile. "No, of course not. Just follow procedure. That'll be all. No thanks. No acknowledgement. No apology. Just procedure." Malik walked out of that room carrying nothing but humiliation and the sinking weight of a new realization. Even being right didn't matter here. Not when it came from him. Later that week, a new intern cohort arrived. Fresh faces, buzzing with energy, mostly from Ivy League schools. Malik watched from his desk as they were each welcomed by department heads, assigned mentors, and given guided tours of the facility. No one came for him. He had never been assigned a mentor, never been given a walkthrough. He only found out where the cafeteria was after asking the janitor during his second week. At lunch he overheard two interns talking. "Zach's mentoring me directly," one said proudly. "He said we get early exposure to core simulation work." "Dude, same," the other replied. "I already got added to the Slack with the project leads." Malik wasn't even in the group chat. No one had told him it existed. Back at his cubicle, Malik stared at his screen. The telemetry system logs blinked dully. Most interns would have shut down, waited out the clock, ridden the internship to its quiet conclusion. But Malik wasn't most interns. That night he stayed behind again, alone in the lab. He opened a sandbox environment and began designing a new telemetry compression algorithm, one that could reduce data noise during long-range space communication. It wasn't assigned to him. It wasn't part of any intern project. But it was critical work, the kind that could improve mission efficiency by 15% if done right. He coded through dinner, fingers moving with silent fury. This wasn't just about proving his intelligence. It was about survival. Every line he wrote was a protest against the quiet erasure. Every function he tested was a refusal to be forgotten. By midnight he had a working prototype. No one would see it yet, but it was real, and it was his. He started building documentation, testing against previous Mars mission datasets. The telemetry stabilized. The signal lag reduced. It worked. That same week, he got an email from HR. Routine internship survey. One of the questions stood out. "Do you feel supported by your team?" Malik closed the tab without answering. The following day, while reviewing logs in the team server, Malik saw something odd, an internal file misnamed in a temporary folder. Curious, he opened it. It was a memo draft for an internal retention analysis of interns of color. His name was there. Next to it, a cold, clinical line. "Dawson, I admit, quiet disposition, low retention risk. No projected internal advocacy. Note, avoid high visibility assignments." He read it again. Low retention risk. Avoid high visibility. It wasn't just a matter of being overlooked. It was strategic, calculated. He wasn't a part of the plan. He was an obstacle to be managed. A box checked. A name to file away without incident. He forwarded the memo to his personal email, encrypted it, and closed the tab. No one knew he had seen it. Not yet, but someone else had. Later that evening, as he sat staring blankly at the Mars lander interface, a Slack message popped up on his screen, from a name he barely recognized, Nina Alvarez, a quiet systems analyst who rarely spoke in meetings. "Check your inbox. Thought you should see this." Attached was the finalized memo, the one the team would submit. His name wasn't just marked as low retention. It was flagged with a red tag labeled, "Minimal Technical Potential." They had already decided who he was, before he'd even finished showing them. The following morning, Malik arrived to find his access badge no longer working at the main terminal. A security guard waved him aside. "There's been a change in your clearance," he said. No explanation, no warning. And for the first time Malik wondered, what were they trying to keep him from seeing next? Malik sat in the break room, badge clipped to his shirt, untouched coffee growing cold in his hand. His clearance had just been downgraded. No one had told him why. There was no written notice, no flagged infraction, just a silent lockout at the entrance of his usual terminal, and a quiet redirect from a guard who didn't look him in the eye. His workstation had been moved. Now he was parked at a shared desk with no access to the telemetry simulation environment. Just spreadsheets, export logs, and a blank calendar. Everything he'd spent the last month building, his custom telemetry patch, his legacy correction scripts, even his draft algorithm, was locked behind privileges he no longer held. He wasn't just being sidelined, he was being erased. It took a week to regain partial access. He didn't fight it through HR. He knew that road led nowhere. Instead, he worked after hours again, this time using a shadow account a sympathetic IT intern had set up for him. Untraceable, unofficial, off-grid, the only way to keep contributing without being watched. And Malik did contribute. While everyone else fumbled through the Mars orbiter's telemetry issues after the failed test sim, he wrote a silent patch, an optimization script that not only corrected the original descent error but improved data relay efficiency by nearly He embedded failsafes, made it modular, easy to integrate, almost idiot-proof. He didn't sign his name. He couldn't afford to. Instead, he left behind a single line of commented code at the bottom, buried beneath layers of logic.
Author redundant but precise.
He submitted it quietly, routing it through the test environment under a generic engineering batch ID. The script went live within 72 hours, and the system worked. Telemetry stabilized. The lander simulations now completed without failure. Panic lifted. Management celebrated. The next public demonstration would go ahead, as scheduled, salvaging what had been a PR disaster in the making. Malik waited for someone to ask. No one did. He watched from the lab as the press conference aired live from the main auditorium. Rows of suited X clapped on stage, and standing at the podium was Zach Harland, the same man who had refused to read Malik's correction weeks earlier. Zach smiled wide for the cameras, gesturing at a slide behind him showing a restored descent arc. We were fortunate, he said. One of our system engineers caught a deep legacy conflict buried in the code. With a little teamwork, we stabilized the mission path. The applause came fast and loud. There was no mention of Malik. Not a word. He stared at the screen as if it had slapped him. In that moment, something inside him broke. Not a snap, but a slow, twisting grind. Not rage. Not yet. Just disbelief curling into something sharper. The kind of quiet anger that builds in people who've been told their place too many times. When he walked into his supervisor's office that afternoon, she didn't even look surprised. Close the door, she said flatly. Her name was Dr. Evelyn Kramer, one of the few women in a leadership position. But as Malik had learned, marginalized people in power didn't always stand with the marginalized below them. He stood in front of her desk, arms crossed. That patch they're praising? That was mine. She glanced up from her monitor, lips pursed. You weren't assigned to that module. I submitted it through the batch system. That's not protocol. Neither is stealing credit. She leaned back in her chair, arms folded like a shield. Mr. Dawson, you're an intern. You're here to observe, assist, and learn, not to freelance unauthorized changes to mission code. You should be careful with that kind of initiative. Malik didn't move. I solved the problem. Her tone dropped. You're lucky to be here at all. The words hung between them like smoke. Ugly, thick, suffocating. He left the office without another word. That night, Malik opened the internal compliance portal and submitted a formal grievance. It was measured, detailed, backed by documentation. He cited timestamps, hash verifications of the code, and his original flagged simulations. He kept the language neutral, professional, impossible to ignore. Then he waited. The response came 2 days later, not in the form of an investigation, but a reassignment notice. Effective immediately, Malik was being transferred to the Data Integrity and Verification Team, a non-technical division responsible for auditing equipment logs and updating legacy documentation. The message was short. No explanation, no justification, no appeal, just one line. This reassignment will allow you to focus on tasks more aligned with your experience level. Experience level. The phrase made his jaw clench so tight he thought he might crack a molar. He reported to the new team the next morning. It was a cramped office with flickering lights and old Dell monitors. The kind of room where forgotten projects went to die. No one there worked on live missions. No one there spoke to senior engineers. This wasn't a reassignment. It was an exile. Malik tried to push through it. He sat at his new desk, doing the meaningless work they gave him. Verifying timestamps, comparing backup logs, logging equipment serial numbers from 5 years ago. His hands moved, but his mind was somewhere else, tracing every step that had led him here. He had been right. He had saved the mission. And still, they made him disappear. Inside was a printed copy of an internal report labeled System Patch Attribution, Simulation Batch 12. The final name listed under Contributor Acknowledgements. Zach Harland.
No one else, no team, no batch ID trail, just Zach.
At the bottom, in smaller print, patch code authored internally by senior engineering. Confirmed. Verified. Malik stared at it, pulse thudding. He flipped the page. And there it was. A log entry from 3 days before the patch went live. A digital footprint he hadn't expected anyone to find. It was his signature. His encryption tag. Time-stamped. Verified. Overwritten hours later. They had stolen it clean, then scrubbed the server. But they missed this backup trace. One breadcrumb. Just enough. Malik stared at the signature, realization dawning slowly. If this file existed, what else had they archived and hidden? And what if someone else had already been through this and disappeared before they could speak? The walls in the data integrity lab didn't just feel narrow. They felt designed to compress a person's spirit. Off-white paint, chipped at the corners, ceiling tiles stained yellow from forgotten leaks. It was the kind of space that whispered, "You've been put here to be forgotten." But even buried under spreadsheets and obsolete satellite logs, Malik remained alert, watchful. Every spare moment between assignments, he combed through archived data pipelines, not out of curiosity, but because it was the only access they hadn't stripped away. Legacy systems often held secrets newer departments didn't know existed, secrets people got sloppy with. One afternoon, while cleaning up a deprecated backup cluster tagged Diversies 2017, Malik noticed something unusual, an outdated machine learning folder marked Recruit Filter v1.3. He opened it, expecting outdated resume parsing scripts. Instead, what he found made his stomach turn cold. It was an algorithm, a crude early-stage AI filter used for parsing intern applications. A Python script paired with a word frequency model, and a long manually curated list labeled Names, Category Flag for Adult Review. He scrolled through the list. Jamal, Deshaun, Aaliyah, Lakeisha, Tyrone, Malik. His own name was there. Next to each entry, a tag score modifier, Mord Escalate Review. Malik stared at the screen, unable to breathe. The algorithm wasn't built to evaluate skill. It was built to screen out black and brown applicants, coded in the language of risk assessment, masked under technical jargon like semantic anomalies and review thresholds. And it had been deployed, not just tested, deployed. Line after line, the script confirmed its use. From 2017 to 2021, before being quietly retired and archived, it ran as a first-layer screening tool in NASA's summer internship intake process. Thousands of applications, filtered by names. Malik downloaded the files immediately, encrypted them, and backed them to two separate drives, one stored locally, the other sent to a secure cloud account only he could access. Then he deleted the access logs. He knew better than to leave footprints. That night, in the one-bedroom apartment he shared with his college roommate, Andre, Malik sat on the worn couch, eyes hollow. Andre, sipping a beer, leaned over the screen. "Are you serious?" Malik nodded slowly, voice dry. This isn't just bias. This was built, engineered." Andre was quiet for a long time. Then he exhaled sharply. "Leak it. I'm serious. Drop it to the press. Send it to every black tech blog, every diversity watchdog. Hell, send it to Congress." Malik didn't move. He knew the cost of fire. "This could burn your whole internship." Andre added, "Maybe your whole career." "I'm not trying to burn anything," Malik said softly. "I'm trying to fix something." Andre frowned. "They stole your work, blackballed you. And now this? And you still want to play savior?" Malik didn't respond. Because it wasn't about saving them. It was about saving something of himself, his belief that truth could matter if handled right. He didn't want headlines. He wanted change. He decided not to leak. Not yet. Instead, he began quietly gathering more evidence, building a timeline, correlating data. The deeper he went, the darker it got. He found recommendation reports with racially coded language phrases, like unpolished communication or culturally inconsistent demeanor, almost exclusively tied to Black or Latinx candidates. He mapped old application logs, showing qualified students of color being screened out early, while less credentialed white students advanced. He even found one instance where an intern with the same GPA and college background as himself, but named Gregory Whitman, received an auto-invite to interview, while his own application had been flagged for secondary review. Same resume, different name, different skin. Meanwhile, Zach Harlan's career continued to climb. In a company-wide email, a proud announcement was made: Zach Harlan promoted to Deputy Director of Systems Integration. Attached were smiling photos of Zach shaking hands with NASA brass, his bio rewritten to mention his critical role in salvaging Mars mission telemetry. The lie had now become canon. Malik didn't speak during the office. "Congratulations," he watched from the back. a fixed smile on his face, hands in his pockets. When the cupcakes were passed around, he declined. Sweetness had no place in his mouth that day. But he noticed something odd. As Zach passed by his desk, he stopped. Just for a second. "Still hanging in there, Dawson?" Zach said, too friendly voice slick with patronization. Malik didn't look up. "For now," Zach chuckled. "Good. We need every set of eyes we can get. Even in the back rooms." The message was clear. "We see you. We know where you are. And we put you there." Later that week, while Malik was compiling more screenshots into his encrypted file, his terminal suddenly froze. He restarted it, assuming a system bug. But when he tried to re-access the archive database, a flashing red prompt appeared. "Access denied. Insufficient clearance." He tried the legacy system next. Same result. Confused, he stood up and approached the floor manager, a dull voice administrator named Craig Whitmore. "My badge isn't working on the archive cluster," Malik said calmly. Craig checked his tablet. "Looks like your clearance level was adjusted. Effective today." "Why?" Craig shrugged. "No reason listed. Could be audit protocol, or a restructuring. You'll have to check with security." Malik pressed. "Restructuring of what? I wasn't told anything." Craig raised an eyebrow. "You're still on payroll, right? Then I wouldn't worry about it." But Malik did worry. Because for the second time in 2 months, he had been locked out of his own work without explanation. Only this time, he was certain it wasn't an oversight. Someone knew he had seen the algorithm. Someone had traced his access, and now the doors were closing again. Tighter, faster, with more finality. That night, he logged into his secure drive from home and downloaded a hard copy of every file he had gathered. He burned it to a flash drive, sealed it in a weatherproof envelope, and dropped it into a locker at the Greyhound station downtown, under a false name, just in case. The next morning, Malik arrived to find his workstation gone, wiped clean. His name was removed from the intern directory. And a new intern, white, fresh-faced and smiling, now sat in his seat, wearing Malik's old ID badge, laminated with a new name. It was a Thursday morning when the air shifted. Not literally. Pasadena's dry heat still pressed through the tinted windows, but something in the lab's rhythm had changed. Tension coiled beneath the surface of voices. Monitors flickered faster. A few engineers stood instead of sat, pacing with coffee cups clenched like stress balls. Malik watched it all unfold from a corner of the auxiliary room, where his new observation-only status left him seated far from the action, like a museum guest peering in on something sacred. The drone flight test was supposed to be routine, a mid-atmospheric calibration exercise, with a prototype lander drone, built for Martian terrain, mimicry. The test flight would follow a programmed pattern, simulate slight turbulence, and return, standard procedure. But that morning, the words test and safe began to feel dangerously unrelated. Malik's eyes stayed on the main screen, streaming data from the drone's telemetry feed. The flight had just entered its second arc over the Mojave test range. And then, without warning, the numbers stuttered. Altitude, unstable. Velocity, erratic. Gyroscope calibration, spike. Malik leaned in instinctively. The telemetry data looked familiar, uncannily so. He recognized the pattern, the naming conventions, the variables. They'd been modified, yes, but their architecture was his. The seed functions mirrored the compression algorithm he'd written weeks ago. The telemetry scaffold now powering this drone was, without question, built on the very code he had secretly deployed to stabilize the Mars simulation. Only now, it had been altered. Loosely, carelessly. The screen flashed red. Drone rotation exceeded safe threshold. Throttle adjustments failed to execute. Communications lagged. Panic in the control room bled into open murmurs. Voices rose. Quick commands traded over headsets. Someone said, "We're losing it. Manual override isn't responding." Another, "We didn't simulate this scenario. We didn't think we'd need to." And then just before the drone could spiral out of control, an automated recovery routine kicked in. Smooth correction. Stabilization. A series of error handling loops recalibrated the pitch and roll, guiding the drone back into controlled descent. The room exploded in relief. Cheers. Applause. High fives. Laughter returning like oxygen. Malik didn't move. He stared at the final lines of code, still running on screen. The patch that had just saved the mission. The same recovery algorithm he had buried in his original work. The same one that Zach and his team had scrubbed from the records. Only it wasn't altered. Not anymore. It had been restored to its original form. Someone had replaced the edited telemetry scaffold with Malik's original code line for line. He knew because he saw it in the signature loop structure he'd invented himself. A recursive failsafe that was elegant, lightweight, and far too specific to be accidental. It wasn't just stolen work. It was stolen again, after being broken, only to be resurrected in desperation. And no one would say a word about it. An hour later, leadership debriefed the event as a minor telemetry hiccup, resolved by the engineering team's quick thinking. Zach, now a deputy director, smiled before a group of visiting officials and described the incident as a testament to our resilience and teamwork. No mention of the instability. No mention of the code swap. Malik listened from the hallway, every syllable scraping against his ribs. He wanted to storm in, to pull the telemetry feed, to play it live for everyone to see, but he already knew what would happen if he did. They'd spin it, frame it, call it unprofessional, say he was obsessing, say he was unstable. Instead, he returned to his desk, opened his encrypted folder, and cross-referenced the final drone test patch with the original telemetry files he'd authored. He ran a checksum. Match confirmed. His fingerprints. Their fate. Late that evening, as the lab emptied out, Malik stood by the windows facing west. The sky over Pasadena was amber, with smog, streaked with the pink of a dying day. He wondered if anyone else felt the weight of what had nearly happened, if they understood how close they'd come to disaster, because someone had thought it smarter to erase a black intern's name than to trust his code. A quiet knock interrupted the silence. He turned. It was Mina Alvarez again, the systems analyst, her expression unreadable. "I heard you flagged a discrepancy in the drone logs," she said. "I didn't flag anything," Malik replied flatly. "They just used the code I wrote, then acted like they didn't." She nodded. "I know. I saw the signature loop. You didn't say anything. I'm saying something now." They stood in silence for a moment. Then she stepped closer. "You're not the first, you know. They've been doing this for years. Taking what they want, erasing what they don't." Malik exhaled, shoulders heavy. "Why stay?" "Because I know how to listen," she said, "and because some stories deserve to be heard from the inside." She handed him a card, unmarked, black with silver trim. On the back a name was scrawled. Layla Chen, investigative journalist. Pacific Beacon News. She's been looking into NASA's diversity initiatives for a while. Quietly. She's legit. You didn't hear it from me. Malik looked at the card, then back at Mina. "Why now?" "Because they almost crashed a $250,000 prototype using broken code, and covered it up," she said. "And because I think they're getting reckless." That night, Malik sat on the edge of his bed, card in hand, heart pounding. He wasn't afraid of being fired anymore. He was afraid of disappearing. He'd seen the pattern too clearly now. Elevate. Extract. Erase. His own seat had been filled by someone else within days. His name stripped from logs. His clearance downgraded. Badge revoked. And now his code resurrected, only when it became mission critical. He picked up his phone and stared at the number on the back of the card. He didn't want revenge. He wanted history corrected. And maybe, just maybe, he wanted someone to finally say, "You were never crazy. You were never imagining this. It really did happen." As he reached for the dial, a message popped up on his screen from an encrypted email server. "Confidential, requesting interview re NASA's DI policies and whistleblower accounts. Are you willing to talk?" The sender? Layla. The email blinked on his screen long after midnight, pulsing like a quiet dare. "Are you willing to talk?" Sent from a secure server. Signed, Layla. Malik stared at it for a full minute before replying with just 2 words. "Off record." The meeting took place 3 days later in a quiet cafe in Altadena, away from the NASA offices, away from the security cameras, and away from anyone who could overhear. The cafe sat tucked between a bookstore and a closed-down jazz bar. Its walls were painted sun-bleached yellow, with chipped wood tables and a rotating menu written in chalk. Layla Chen was already seated when he arrived. Mid-30s, sharp eyes behind round glasses, and the kind of calm that came from spending years listening more than talking. Her voice, when she spoke, carried the gentleness of someone who knew what fragile stories sounded like when they were first told aloud. "You don't have to give me anything you're not ready to," she said, sliding her phone across the table, face down. "No recordings, no notes, not today." Malik nodded. He appreciated that more than he could say. The conversation started slow. He spoke in fragments, Not because he didn't trust her, but because putting months of emotional bruises into words wasn't as easy as compiling a dataset. He talked about the simulation fix that had been ignored, the stolen patch, the reassignment, the badge being stripped, the unmarked intern taking his place, the algorithm that shouldn't have existed. Layla listened the way archivists do, with reverence. When he paused, she leaned forward slightly. "Do you think this happened just to you?" Malik hesitated. "I think," he began slowly, "I think I was convenient to ignore. I think I made it easier for them to keep pretending." Layla opened her notebook but didn't write. She turned it to the back cover and pulled out a photo, folded, worn at the edges. She passed it to him. 3 black men, 1 Asian woman, smiling in a conference room. "Intern class of 2015, Layla said. "Only 4 of them from underrepresented backgrounds. 3 are no longer in engineering. 1 filed a complaint that never went anywhere." Malik looked at the faces, wondering what they'd gone through, what they had stayed silent about. He slid the photo back. "I'm not ready to go public," he said. "Not yet." Layla nodded. "But you're not the first. And you're definitely not alone." After they parted, Malik couldn't stop thinking about the picture. One face stood out, familiar, but aged. He went back into the archive servers he still had partial access to, searching for any name he could trace from that intern class. And that's when he found it. Elijah Green, a former systems engineer, joined full-time after his internship, left 2 years later with no recorded exit interview, no recommendation, no internal farewell memo. Just gone. Malik dug deeper. Elijah had filed a formal report about data manipulation within the DEI performance metrics. Internal memos suggested he had accused leadership of falsifying diversity outcomes, claiming credit for hires that weren't retained, highlighting interns who never returned. His complaint never reached external review. After that, Elijah disappeared from NASA records. Malik's heart pounded. It was like finding a faded footprint in concrete, a warning left behind by someone who'd already walked the same treacherous road. Using a throwaway email account, Malik reached out. It took 2 days before he got a reply. Subject: stop. Message: if you value your future, stop digging. This doesn't end the way you think. No greeting, no signature, just a whisper typed in warning.
But Malik couldn't stop now. The threads were tightening. The system wasn't just flawed, it was deliberate, coordinated. Every loss, every silence, every missing name. It was part of a pattern, a cycle.
The next day, Elijah called. The number was blocked. Malik picked up anyway. "You need to hear it from someone who got out," Elijah said, his voice low, distorted with distance and fear. "I'm not looking to burn the place down," Malik said. "I just want truth." "There is no justice inside," Elijah replied, "only containment. You start shaking the cage, and they move the walls. Then why are you warning me?" "Because I believed what you believe. That excellence would protect me. That data would speak for me. But they turned my truth into a liability. And then they made sure I couldn't speak again. Not without losing everything." Malik felt a chill slide down his back. "You're smart, Dawson. You've already seen what they do to people who don't stay in line. It starts with clearance, then access, then reputation. Why didn't you fight?" "I did. And then I chose silence. Sometimes silence is the only way to survive." Malik closed his eyes. "I don't want to survive. I want to live and leave something behind that's worth the damage." There was a long pause on the line. "You won't win," Elijah said quietly. "But maybe you'll be remembered." And then he hung up. Malik sat still for a long time, the phone warm in his hand, heart colder than it had ever been. That night, Malik returned to his encrypted cloud vault and found the access logs had been pinged by an unknown device. Someone else had found the files. The air in Malik's apartment was thick with static. He stared at the access logs from his encrypted drive, heart clenching with every line. A device with an anonymized MAC address had pinged the cloud vault 3 times. Once at midnight, once again at 3:42 a.m., and then once more just 10 minutes ago. Someone had found the files, the telemetry code, the intern filtering algorithm, the performance reviews. All of it. His mind raced. Had he left a back door open? Had his secure email been compromised? Had Layla shared something? Or was it someone inside? He shut the laptop, palms sweating. He thought of Elijah's voice, low and tired. "They move the walls." Malik returned to the lab the next morning with his stomach in knots. The usual hum of fluorescent lighting and humming servers was still there, but something had shifted. The silence felt tighter, eyes lingered longer when he passed. Conversations halted when he entered a room. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was protocol. He kept his head down, walking briskly to his new workspace. The corner desk tucked near a utility closet had become his designated station since his clearance had been gutted. But this time something was different. A single sheet of paper lay on his keyboard. He picked it up slowly, recognized the formatting immediately. It was a draft of the telemetry logic he'd written months ago. His original error handling patch for the Mars simulation. The same one that had stabilized the drone mid-flight. But this version had someone else's name at the top. Technical contribution. Lead. Jared Klein. Malik blinked. Jared. The intern who once asked him what diversity program had gotten him in. The one who barely passed the internship exam. Now listed as the primary author of Malik's work. It wasn't a copy. It was a rewrite. His logic, his syntax, his exact language, retyped and restructured just enough to obscure direct plagiarism. Enough to pass casual review. Malik flipped the page over. In the bottom corner was a timestamp dated a week after Malik's reassignment. He leaned back in his chair, the ache in his chest heavier than anything he'd felt since this began. It wasn't just a theft. It was theft designed to be invisible. His ideas weren't being borrowed. They were being systematically rewritten, rebranded, and filed under names that fit the expected mold. Jared, Zach, even Evelyn Kramer had signed off as senior approver at the bottom of the page. Malik stood up and walked the hallways of JPL with new eyes. He passed the project planning board. White faces lined the leadership panels. Mission credit photos framed on the walls. All the same names, same smiles, same symmetry. He glanced at the last framed group photo near the entrance. There just behind Zach was a man he hadn't noticed before. Tall, deep brown skin, thick glasses, expression unreadable. A nameplate beneath the photo read, Elijah Green, systems engineer. A ghost in plain sight. He went deeper into the archives that day, using his restricted terminal and a secure flash drive he'd rebuilt after the breach. He scanned old emails, scanned internal presentations, old code repositories, and there it was. Elijah's name on 6 different internal documents, system schematics, safety logic modules, adaptive signal routing, all dated within a year of his resignation. And yet, Elijah's employment record ended 6 months prior. They hadn't just used his work after he left. They'd buried his name, recycled his brilliance, and moved on like he never existed. Malik sat at his desk, jaw tight. He was living someone else's story. Step for step. He pulled up a system log from 2 years ago. Elijah's final contribution, a dynamic routing model for Mars communication, when direct contact fails. He opened the file. In the footer, backup algorithm enabled on signal loss. Loop until acknowledgement. E.g. It was still in use, still active in the Mars codebase, and no one had ever said his name again. Malik exhaled sharply, gripping the edge of the desk. His fingertips turned white from the pressure. He wasn't afraid of losing his job anymore. He was afraid of being erased so thoroughly that one day, someone else would find his code and wonder who MD was. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Unknown number, no caller ID. He answered on instinct. Malik? Layla's voice was calm, but strained.
Yeah?
You need to know something. Now.
What happened?
There's been a leak. Someone sent me internal emails. Unsigned, encrypted, time-stamped. Performance reviews. Diversity compliance logs. Filtering code. And a chain naming you as the whistleblower. Malik froze. What? How? I don't know. But the metadata's clean. Whoever sent it wanted it traced back to you. Malik's pulse quickened. You didn't publish it? No, not yet. But others have it. I think it's being circulated internally. And possibly externally. Internally? How would they? Someone wants you exposed. His breath caught in his throat. What's in the emails? Enough to destroy your credibility, or make you the centerpiece of a very ugly, very public debate. Malik pressed a hand against the wall. Everything spinning. He had been careful. Locked every file. Used secure servers. Masked metadata. Why now? Why like this? And then he remembered the access log. The breach. Someone had taken the files and turned them into a weapon. Layla's voice softened. I'm sorry, Malik. But it's happening. Before Malik could respond, a new email pinged on his work terminal. Subject line HR review. Urgent misconduct allegation. Mandatory meeting scheduled. Sender. Office of Compliance. NASA JPL. The badge failed before sunrise. Malik had arrived early, hoping to get ahead of the mandatory HR meeting. A meeting that, despite being framed as routine, was marked with enough corporate vagueness to scream trap. He scanned his ID at the main entrance. Nothing. He tried again. A red flash. 3 beeps. Then the words appeared on the screen. Access denied, permission revoked. Security glanced up from the desk. One of them, Jeff, the older guard who usually nodded at Malik with casual indifference, now stood straighter, suddenly formal. Mr. Dawson, he said, voice clipped. Yeah, Malik replied, trying to mask the churn in his chest. I'll need you to wait here. Someone from compliance is on their way. It was official. Whatever line had been crossed, it had been crossed in full view, and they weren't hiding it anymore. 15 minutes later, Malik was escorted, not guided, not accompanied, but escorted to a side conference room. Neutral carpeting, no windows, a pot of stale coffee sat untouched on the counter. They left him there, alone. His phone buzzed once. Layla Chen, it's moving faster than I expected. Be careful what you say in there. Then came the email ping on his personal laptop. He opened it with shaking hands. Subject, credential integrity. Public concern notification. From no reply to Orbit Watch. He clicked the link. The headline slapped him. NASA internet under review for fraudulent credentials, not who he claimed to be. Beneath it, a grainy photo. Malik, blurry, taken from some internal team shot months ago. The article was short, inflammatory, and anonymous. It accused Malik of falsifying his academic record, claimed he'd never graduated Georgia Tech, that he had been admitted as a social initiative placement, and was now under internal review for accessing classified files beyond his clearance level. There were no sources, no evidence, no quotes, but it was already spreading. The comments section boiled. DI hires are gonna get us all killed. Another fake genius with a sob story. Betty pulled the race card the moment things got tough. Malik stared at the screen, heart hollowing. The lies weren't even creative. They were expected, practiced, sharpened for moments. Just like this. He refreshed his NASA email out of habit more than hope. Account suspended. And that's when the second realization hit him. This wasn't an investigation. This was an erasure in motion. By noon, Malik's Slack access was disabled. His credentials removed from the team roster. His name disappeared from the internal wiki. Coworkers didn't speak to him in the halls. They passed by with downcast eyes or turned corners quickly. One even looked directly at him and offered a half-hearted, I hope it all works out. No one asked what it was. He wasn't a colleague anymore. He was a liability. Malik reached out to Layla from a burner email. Told her everything. Sent redacted copies of the emails, the documents, the code thefts. Everything except the files that could compromise NASA systems directly. Within hours, her article was live. The headline didn't name Malik, but it didn't need to. Silenced systems. Inside NASA's diversity illusion. The story was damning. It exposed the filtering algorithm, the erased contributors, the documented manipulation of internship retention reports. It didn't use Malik's name, but included chilling detail from a whistleblower currently under retaliatory review. It hit hard. The piece spread quickly across LinkedIn, Reddit, and private Slack groups. Quiet conversations erupted within engineering forums, black tech circles, and among journalists who had long suspected NASA's diversity programs were more public relations than practice. But it also triggered the other side. Conservative blogs pounced, social media accounts with eagle avatars and bio lines, reading anti-woke engineer went to war. NASA is being infiltrated by radicals. They want handouts, not merit. These woke hires are putting national security at risk. Malik's identity wasn't confirmed, but it didn't matter. People started piecing things together. Someone leaked his LinkedIn. Anonymous accounts began digging into his past, posting photos from his college years, questioning his GPA, mocking his family name. His inbox filled with noise. Affirmative action fraud. You're lucky anyone let you in at all. Leave before you ruin more. He unplugged his phone, shut his laptop, and sat in silence, staring at the floor. This wasn't about exposing the truth anymore. This was survival. By the following morning, NASA made a move. A formal statement was issued. NASA has initiated a comprehensive internal audit in response to claims made in recent media reports. We are committed to integrity, transparency, and ensuring a workplace that values merit and accountability. Malik laughed bitterly when he read it. Integrity. Transparency. He'd watched his name vanish from every system while someone else took credit for his work. He'd written the code that saved their mission, and now he was the threat. But the statement ended with something unexpected. We have asked the whistleblower to participate in the audit and clarify any claims made. They wanted him to testify. Publicly or not, they wanted him in the room. Layla messaged him that evening. They're trying to control the narrative, but it means they're scared. The audit is real. You need to be ready. Malik sat in his apartment, blinds drawn, everything quiet. The decision clawed at him. To show up meant risking everything. His career, his safety, maybe even his future. But not showing up meant letting them write his legacy for him. Just like they'd done to Elijah. Just like they'd done to every ghost in the hallway. He opened his calendar and saw it already populated.
Internal audit review. Engineering compliance testimony. 9 Ocean AM. Conference room Delta.
Attached was a list of attendees. At the top, Zach Harland, Deputy Director, Lead Examiner. The conference room labeled Delta was colder than Malik expected. Not just in temperature, but in tone. The walls were stark, painted that non-color that corporations use to mute emotion. A long oval table stood at the center, wrapped in a horseshoe of stiff chairs and hard expressions. At the far end, facing everyone, sat the person leading the internal audit. Zach Harland, polished, poised. Smiling like this was just another performance review. He wore the same blazer Malik had once seen him accept an award in, as if the symbolism wasn't lost on either of them. The other faces included Dr. Evelyn Kramer, 2 legal reps from HR, and an external observer from the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs. The room was silent, except for the faint buzz of the overhead projector and the soft clicks of styluses on digital tablets. Malik walked in carrying a single manila folder. No briefcase, no lawyer, no PR handler, just the weight of a truth they'd spent months trying to suffocate. "Please be seated," said one of the attorneys, a woman in a gray skirt suit with a clipped tone. "This session is being recorded as part of NASA's internal audit proceedings." Malik nodded and took his seat. Zach began. "Mr. Dawson, we're here to evaluate claims tied to unauthorized data access, falsified credentials, and the dissemination of confidential materials to third-party media sources." There it was. They weren't here to investigate misconduct. They were here to brand it. Malik didn't flinch. "And I'm here to testify, under oath, to the work I did, and the truth you tried to bury." The attorney cleared her throat. "Let's begin chronologically. Your internship began on June 2nd. What was your assigned role?" "I was placed in telemetry systems. Integrity. No mentor. No team integration. My first task was legacy data archiving." "And when did you begin contributing beyond that role?" Malik opened a folder. Inside were color-coded printouts, each one a digital fingerprint. His timestamps, his simulations, his code patches. "June 19th, he said. "I discovered a flaw in the Mars orbiter simulation logic. I submitted a fix. It was ignored." He handed the printout down the table. The attorney flipped through it, brow tightening. Zach interrupted. "We already established that the failure in that simulation was due to hardware calibration. That finding was validated by—" "No," Malik said sharply. "It failed because of a decimal misplacement in the angle descent logic, one I documented, simulated, and submitted, twice." He slid the next printout across. This one included screenshots of the emails, the file metadata, and the silent rejections. The room went still. Dr. Kramer shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. The attorney moved on. "Your telemetry patch. How did that enter the main codebase?" "I routed it through a generic batch ID. It went live, because it worked, because no one else had a working fix." "And who received credit?" Malik looked directly at Zach. "Tim." Zach smiled politely. "There's no verifiable way to prove authorship of a shared system patch." Malik lifted the final printout. "There is if you know how checksum logs work." He handed over the page. 2 checksum sequences. One from the pre-launch patch that failed. One from the recovery patch that stabilized the test flight. Only one matched Malik's original submission, line for line. The attorney examined it. Zach's face didn't change. but the tap of his pen against the table quickened. Let's move to the performance review system. The lawyer continued. You claim there was algorithmic bias in the intern application process. There was bias, Malik replied. I found an internal script, Recruit Filter V1.3. It flagged names like Jamal, Aliyah, and mine for manual review and reduced acceptance scoring. It ran from 2017 to 2021. The files are in your backup servers. You illegally accessed those files. Zach interjected. I accessed what I was assigned to clean. They were misfiled. I documented them. I encrypted them. And when I tried to report them, my clearance was downgraded. There was no response to that, just silence. Finally, Malik leaned forward, voice steady. You call me a diversity token. A box checked. A number to pad reports. But your drones run on my recovery code. Your Mars simulation stabilized because of my math. You removed my name. You reassigned me. You tried to vanish me. But every piece of data I touched still echoes with my initials, and you know it. Zach didn't smile now. He just stared. The room held its breath. The attorney spoke next, voice quieter now. Mr. Dawson, are you willing to provide your documentation for formal review? I already have, he said. The folder in front of you contains everything. Dated, verified, backed up, and publicly mirrored. If anything happens to me. Dr. Kramer finally spoke. What are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting, Malik replied. I'm stating, if this board chooses to continue protecting false credit, burying whistleblowers, and sanitizing systemic bias under procedural discretion, then it's not just an internal issue, it's a public one, and I'm not the only one who's watching anymore. The silence that followed was thick. One of the external compliance officers whispered something to his colleague. Another typed rapidly into a tablet. The attorney took a slow breath. This concludes the initial deposition of Malik Dawson. But before she could finish, the door burst open. A technician, sweating, out of breath, stood in the frame, holding a tablet. Sorry, he said, breath hitching, but we've got a real problem. Everyone turned. What kind of problem? Zach asked, standing. The tech handed him the tablet. Telemetry feed just flatlined. Mars rover isn't responding. Communications blackout, full system failure. They're saying we have less than 20 minutes before permanent data loss. Zach's face blanched. The attorney tried to intervene. We're in a protected deposition. This can wait. No, the tech said, voice sharp. It really can't. Malik sat still, watching Zach's hands tremble as he scanned the tablet. The same system Zach had taken credit for. The same code that only one person in the room truly understood. Zach turned slowly, eyes meeting Malik's for the first time without condescension. And for the first time in weeks, Malik heard something real in his voice. Can you fix it? The moment Zach's trembling voice broke through the silence. Can you fix it? The energy in the room changed. Gone was the smugness. Gone was the polish. What remained was raw panic, the kind that could only exist when something truly precious was unraveling in real time. Malik didn't respond immediately. He looked around the table, the same faces that had doubted him, silenced him, erased him. They now waited, breathless, like he was a lifeboat they'd mocked before the ship started sinking. Zach's eyes didn't waver. The desperation in them was unmistakable. Malik stood slowly, collected the folder he'd just used to defend himself, and followed the technician out into the hallway without a word. Outside the deposition room, the air was different. It moved faster. Engineers in polos and security badges darted through corridors like ants after a boot stomp. Someone barked into a headset. Another sat cross-legged against a wall, laptop perched on knees, face pale. The telemetry center was chaos. Inside, giant screens showed fragmented lines of data, red blinking alerts, and static. The Mars rover's feed had flatlined. Diagnostic reads were missing. Communications looped in, failed retries. The room reeked of tension, and Malik saw something else. Fear disguised as technical confusion. The system that had run flawlessly for months had collapsed, and it had collapsed on their watch. A senior systems engineer, David Shu, one of the few staffers who had never directly opposed Malik, but also never supported him, was hunched over a terminal near the main console. He looked up as Malik entered, face tight. We can't re-establish handshake, he said. The emergency routing loop isn't triggering. The system's ignoring the recovery logic. Malik frowned. Did you modify the logic? No. We kept your version, David admitted. eyes flickering with guilt. But there was a patch last week, not yours. Someone layered something over the base code, without a version tag. Malik stepped closer to the console. Who signed off on the override? David hesitated. Then quietly, Zach. In the background, the countdown clock ticked. A 20-minute window to re-establish signal or risk permanent data loss from the rover. Maybe even full mission compromise. Everything they'd sent to Mars, the years of planning, the billions of dollars, the decades of trust in the program, all of it was now balancing on an unresponsive signal. Malik asked one question. What version is currently running? David pulled it up. Malik scanned the parameters. The loop structure was different. The error handler was misaligned. Someone had swapped his recursive safe mode entry with a faster, less reliable interrupt call. It had saved power, but cost reliability. It wasn't his code anymore. It was Zach's patchwork. Malik looked up. That's why the failover isn't working. David stepped back. Can you rebuild it? Not from scratch, Malik said, but I can revert to my original logic. If you give me root access full kernel override, I can restore the safety shell and re-establish handshake. Another engineer, Priya Mehta, someone Malik had only spoken to twice, chimed in. Root access is restricted. David looked between her and Malik, then to the room, then to the screen. Open it, he said. You sure? David nodded. If this fails, we're toast anyway. Priya began typing. Malik stepped up to the main console, hands hovering above the keyboard like a pianist about to improvise a melody in front of a crowd that had only ever seen him cleaning the stage. The system prompted for authentication. David whispered the master override password. Malik entered it, and then he worked. The room fell silent, except for the clatter of keys and the subtle ticking of the countdown. Malik's fingers moved fast, but deliberately. He backtracked the corrupted loop, restored the recursive handler, and reintegrated the telemetry safety shell line by line. He was rewriting himself back into the mission. Every command he entered was one they had once denied him the authority to even see. And now, their future depended on it. He finished with a simple command. XESNR rover ping. Authorized sync request. Safe mode entry. He hit enter. The screen blinked, then paused. Then, data flow returned. First a trickle static. Fragmented signal logs. Then, full lines of telemetry. The rover responded. Images from the Martian surface returned in sequence. Environmental reports populated. Status. Operational. A cheer erupted. Some clapped. Some gasped. Malik didn't move. He just stood there, shoulders still, watching the mission he saved finally breathe again. Zach entered the control room moments later, just as the energy reached its peak. He glanced at the screen, saw the signal restored. Then his eyes found Malik, standing at the center console like a man who had just pulled a falling plane out of a nosedive with bare hands. He opened his mouth to speak, but Malik beat him to it. Next time, Malik said, calm but pointed. Don't strip a system of its redundancies just because you don't understand the reason they're there. Zach closed his mouth. The room didn't clap for Malik. Not yet. But they looked at him. Truly looked. For the first time, eyes didn't skim past him. Didn't carry the pre-decided narrative of what he was or wasn't. He wasn't a name in a memo anymore. He was the man who had saved the mission. Priya turned to him quietly. We should have listened. Malik didn't respond. Not out of pride. Out of clarity. Because this wasn't vindication. It was a single temporary survival. He walked out of the control room, not stopping for the handshakes, not stopping for the late apologies. As he reached the hallway, his phone buzzed. Layla again. Her message was short. Press wants confirmation. There's a leak. They're naming you now. Not anonymously. Before Malik could reply, a NASA PR rep intercepted him in the hallway. Mr. Dawson, she said, eyes tense. The administrator would like a word. Alone. The hallway outside the control center echoed with footsteps, some fast, some hesitant. The NASA PR rep who intercepted Malik walked ahead without looking back, her heels clicking like punctuation marks. Her body language was stiff, formal. This wasn't a celebration, this was damage control. Malik followed in silence, his hands still pulsing from the adrenaline of reprogramming the Mars rover's last hope in real time. The mission was back online. The world didn't know how close it had come to unraveling, but NASA did. And now they needed to rewrite the story, before anyone else could. The rep stopped at a sleek conference room on the top floor, its frosted glass panes etched with the agency's logo. She opened the door for him, then stepped aside. Inside, seated alone at the end of a long mahogany table, was Administrator Linda Verano, the highest-ranking official at JPL. Her silver hair was pulled back into a sharp bun, her navy blazer immaculate. She looked up from a printed briefing and offered a neutral smile. "Mr. Dawson," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. "Please, sit." Malik sat slowly, unsure if this was going to be an ambush or a backhanded compliment dressed in diplomacy. Verano folded her hands. "What you did today was exceptional. Let me be very clear about that. You prevented a catastrophic data loss. You stabilized a $3.4 billion mission in real time. That's not just talent. That's historic." Malik didn't flinch. "Then why was I locked out of my own work?" She blinked, but didn't answer right away. Instead, she shifted tones. "We've reviewed the audit materials, your telemetry logic, the recruitment filtering algorithm. It's all under review." And she hesitated. "You've become quite the name across internal channels." "I didn't ask to be," he said. "No," Verano admitted. "But that's not the world we live in. The story is already moving. There are reporters outside the gates, senators calling for answers, and we're trying to get ahead of it." Malik crossed his arms. "By spinning the truth?" She leaned in slightly. "By managing the narrative." He knew this game. Polished power disguising itself as benevolence. They weren't here to honor him. They were here to protect themselves from him. "What exactly do you want from me?" he asked, voice steady. Verano tapped the table gently. "We'd like to coordinate a public statement. Something clean. Something that acknowledges your contribution, without inflaming the current climate further. You'll be credited, indirectly, but we'd prefer to avoid placing the agency in an adversarial light." "In other words," Malik said, "you want me to disappear quietly again, but this time with a pat on the back." She didn't deny it. Instead, she offered what she thought was a compromise. "We're offering you a full-time position. Systems engineer too. Above base salary. You'll be placed on the next-gen rover project. You'll have a clean slate." "And what happens to what they did to me?" Malik asked. "The blacklisting? The stolen code? The retaliation?" Verano paused. "Sometimes justice takes time," she said carefully. "But momentum is building. The culture is shifting. You could be part of that shift from the inside." Malik stood. Slowly. Calmly. "I was never allowed inside," he said. "Everything I gave this place, I gave while they tried to keep me out. What I fixed wasn't just broken systems, it was broken integrity." Her expression faltered. "You can keep your offer," Malik said, turning toward the door. "You'll need it more than I do." And he walked out. No security guard stopped him this time. No badge beeped red. But the silence in the hall felt heavier than applause. By evening, Malik was gone from the building, but not from the headlines. Layla's follow-up article dropped at 7:02 p.m. It was timed perfectly, pinned to the top of every major tech and science thread online. The headline hit like thunder. "The Ghost in the Machine: How a Silenced Intern Rescued NASA's Mission from Itself." It didn't just chronicle the telemetry fix. It detailed the algorithm that flagged applicants by race. The credential smearing, the code theft, the photo of Malik in the control room, staring at the screen as the rover reconnected, was paired with a pull quote that spread like wildfire. They called him a diversity token. Then they used his silence to build their mission. Within hours, the article was trending globally. Every comment section, every science forum, every group chat in every HBCU engineering department lit up. Some called him a hero, others called him a liar, but no one could ignore him anymore. By morning, the backlash had shifted targets. NASA's official statement, a carefully worded, jargon-filled release, was torn apart for avoiding accountability. "We are reviewing systemic issues and working to uphold values of equity and integrity," it read. Too late. News broke just after noon. Congress was launching a federal investigation into NASA's hiring practices, intern program, and whistleblower protections. A joint letter, signed by 12 members of the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology, called for hearings. And Malik Dawson's name was on the docket, not as a suspect, but as a witness. The very institution that had scrubbed him from its servers now had to face him under oath. Zach Harlan declined to comment. Dr. Evelyn Kramer quietly requested a sabbatical. Online forums started building timelines of similar cases. Other interns who had disappeared from the system. One by one, ghosts were being named. And Malik? He said nothing to the press. He didn't tweet. Didn't give interviews. Didn't even repost Layla's article. He just waited. Because he knew this was no longer about attention. It was about accountability. The kind that didn't just expose injustice, but rewrote who got to speak about it. 1 week later, Malik received a package with no return address. Inside, a flash drive. On it, folders dated 2015, each labeled with names. The first one, E. Green, recovery shell. The flash drive sat on Malik's desk like a bomb. 3 folders. Years stamped in the file names. Like gravestones. Inside them, code libraries, internal memos, rejected patches, names he didn't recognize. Dozens of them. But one name he did. E. Green, recovery shell. Elijah's ghost wasn't just real. It had been speaking through every system Malik had touched, and now the evidence was his to carry. Proof that this wasn't one man's story, or one intern's trauma. It was a system built to mine brilliance and erase the fingerprints. But Malik didn't rush to publish. He knew too much now. This wasn't a story to leak, it was a structure to dismantle. And as if the universe had caught fire, the world outside followed. Within 48 hours of Congress announcing the federal investigation, protests erupted outside NASA facilities across the country. From Houston to Cape Canaveral, young engineers, interns, and diversity advocates stood with signs that read, "Silence is systemic. Don't send racism to Mars. We build the future. We deserve to be in it." They didn't chant Malik's name, but they carried his story. Former employees, names Malik had never heard, began speaking out anonymously on Reddit, Medium, and internal listservs. Stories that mirrored his stories of being cut out, reassigned, reclassified. The term diversity shadowing went viral, referring to interns of color placed into programs for optics, only to be excluded from real work. Each story poured more fuel on the fire. The tipping point came during a live press conference held by NASA's Deputy Communications Director, who tried in vain to contain the fallout. "We acknowledge systemic oversights," she said. "We are reviewing mentorship allocation and access disparities. We're launching a new equity task force." The room exploded with questions. Is it true Black interns were systematically denied credit for mission-critical code? Why hasn't Malik Dawson been named in any official recognition? Was telemetry recovery really based on a stolen algorithm? She deflected, danced, promised reforms, but the public wasn't listening anymore. They had already picked a side. And Malik? He kept silent. His silence wasn't weakness now. It was a statement. Because while the headlines churned and institutions scrambled to appear responsive, private aerospace firms were watching. And they moved fast. Within a week, Malik received over a dozen job offers. Some were flashy, PR stunts dressed as opportunity. But 3 were real. One from a Black-owned satellite startup in Atlanta. One from a research lab out of MIT's new propulsion think tank. And one anonymous, delivered via a single text message from an unlisted number. "We want you. Name your terms. Full team autonomy. Unlimited R&D budget. No ghosts in the hallways." He didn't reply to any of them. Not yet, because while offers flew, NASA still hadn't said his name. That changed on a quiet Tuesday, when NASA posted a press release titled, "Statement on Recent Audit Findings and Steps Toward Equity." It was 997 words long. It used phrases like inclusivity, unintended oversight, and deep commitment to change. But it never used the words Malik Dawson. Not once. And yet, at the bottom, buried between statistics and strategy, one line caught his eye. "We acknowledge the need to repair trust with those whose voices were lost along the way." That was all they could give him. A shadow reference. A passive apology. It was cowardice dressed as progress. The same day, NASA released a quiet memo to staff. Zach Harland had resigned. Personal reasons. No press conference. No farewell celebration. Just a disappearing act. Some said he was pushed. Others said he left before he could be subpoenaed. Malik didn't care. Justice in public rarely looked like justice in truth. But this wasn't about Zach anymore. Later that week, Malik attended a virtual scholarship announcement hosted by a national STEM education foundation. He hadn't been told about it. Someone sent him the link in a group chat of Black engineers. He clicked out of curiosity and froze when he saw the name. The Kendra Fields Rising Engineer Award. Kendra, the shy black intern who had sat 2 rows behind him during orientation. The one who had quietly dropped out halfway through the summer without explanation. The one Malik had mentored over lunch breaks, coaching her through self-doubt and a hostile work environment. She had never come back, but she'd remembered him. In her scholarship application, she wrote, "Malik Dawson was the only reason I didn't quit the field entirely. He reminded me that being brilliant and black wasn't a contradiction. It was a threat to systems that weren't ready to share power." Malik sat there, staring at the screen, not realizing he was crying until he tasted salt on his lips. Sometimes the only way to survive a system is to outlive its version of your story. And then, late that night, another message arrived. This one wasn't from Layla, or a journalist, or a recruiter. It was from a government server, encrypted and labeled confidential. There was no signature, no salutation, just a subject line. Potential recruitment, Federal Deep Space Operations Program, eyes only. And a single sentence. "We've been watching you, Mr. Dawson. We have a project off the books, above clearance. We believe you're the only one qualified to lead it." Attached was a file. Name, project inheritance, status classified, black tier clearance required. The building wasn't branded. That was the first sign it was different. No government seal, no shiny public welcome. Just a sleek, gray facade in an undisclosed corner of Nevada, guarded by silence and shadow. Malik stepped through the security checkpoint, escorted by 2 agents, who didn't speak, flanked by retina scanners and coded vaults. Inside, a lab unlike anything he'd ever seen. Quantum computation consoles blinked softly beneath hovering 3D model projections. Hallways glowed with responsive light. Even the whiteboards were digital, rendering sketches in real time, archiving every idea. The team waiting for him was equally unexpected. A Nigerian propulsion physicist, a queer Latinx systems architect, a half-deaf Navajo AI modeler, and a young Afghan-American propulsion engineer who had once been rejected from NASA's internship program due to communication deficiencies. All of them brilliant. All of them displaced by institutions that didn't see them. This wasn't just a project. It was a reclamation. Project Inheritance was classified, but the mission was clear. Develop the first long-range, zero-loss propulsion system for deep space exploration. Something that could make manned Mars missions not just possible, but sustainable. And Malik, at 26, was now leading the Telemetry Integrity Division. They gave him full autonomy, not because they were generous, but because they understood something the old world never had. He knew how to build with stolen blueprints and make them his own. Still, the ghosts followed. He worked long hours, obsessed over performance edges, reviewed every safety simulation 3 times. His team noticed how he hesitated before presenting, how his eyes flickered when someone gave him credit too quickly. Trauma, they learned, doesn't disappear just because the walls are different. Malik spoke rarely of his past. When asked, he called it a chapter, but in private he documented everything. The old emails, the flash drive with Elijah's files, the article Layla had written, the scholarship named for Kendra. He kept a folder titled Unedited Memory on a secure server. He said it was just for him, but he knew it was for the future. Because he understood now, the real legacy wasn't revenge, it was accuracy. Once a month, Malik took a break from the lab and visited schools. Not for photo ops, not for PR, but because he remembered what it felt like to stare at a screen, see no one who looked like you in the credits, and wonder if you belong. In Chicago, he sat with high schoolers from the South Side, diagramming orbital physics with soda cans. In Oakland, he helped black girls solder circuits, refusing to dumb anything down. In Atlanta, he returned to Georgia Tech and met with a new cohort of black engineers, half of whom said they chose the field after reading Layla's article. He never told them the worst of it, but he made sure they left with fire in their hands. At one private session for early career interns, a young man stayed behind after everyone else had left, nervous, fidgeting. "You probably don't remember me," the kid said. Malik looked closer. "I was your orientation partner at NASA," he said. "Back then I didn't say anything. I saw how they treated you. I didn't want to be next." Malik didn't interrupt. "I should have said something. I should have stood next to you." Malik put a hand on the kid's shoulder. "You're here now," he said. That night, Malik updated the hiring protocol for his current team. Every applicant would now be reviewed with context, not just credentials. No name bias. No GPA filtering. Portfolio-based reviews only. Mentors were assigned, not offered, and interns were required to review their mentors, anonymously, at the end of every session. It was quiet change, but it was real. At NASA, things began to shift. Slowly, unevenly. Leadership rolled out new metrics. Diversity reports were made public. Exit interviews were made mandatory. Whistleblower protections were strengthened, not because they wanted to, but because they were afraid not to. Still, resistance festered in corners. Some leaders retired early. Some whispered about reverse discrimination. Others tried to rewrite history, claiming they had always supported Malik's work, even quoting lines from his deposition. But the internet didn't forget, and Malik didn't engage, because he'd learned the difference between visibility and power. You didn't need to scream at the doors when you were already building your own table. One afternoon, he visited a middle school in Pasadena, just blocks away from JPL. The gymnasium was packed. The principal introduced him with pride. Former NASA engineer, current deep space lead, at an undisclosed project. The kids laughed at that part. He spoke gently. Not about rockets, not about telemetry, but about loneliness. About being the only one in the room. About being told you're lucky to be there, when you already knew you belonged. He told them that brilliance wasn't something to be proven to others. It was something to be protected within yourself. When he finished, the kids clapped. He took a few questions. Then one hand, tiny, determined, rose near the back. Little girl. Maybe 9. Hair in puffs. A t-shirt that read "Black Girls Invent." She looked him dead in the eye and asked, "Were you ever scared you weren't good enough?" The gym went silent. Malik's throat tightened. He'd faced senators, lawyers, executives. But this question, the way it was asked, the earnestness of it, punched deeper than anything else ever had. He walked slowly toward her, then crouched to her level. He didn't rush the answer, because this was the only question that ever really mattered. And just as Malik opened his mouth to speak, a voice called from the auditorium door, "Mr. Dawson? There's something urgent." From DC, in the messenger's hand, a sealed envelope, stamped "Top Secret." Eyes only. Congressional subpoena. The sky over Pasadena shimmered with a soft dusk when Malik Dawson returned to the one place that had nearly broken him. Jet Propulsion Laboratory. JP. The same gates. The same sign. The same California breeze, threading through the eucalyptus trees along the entrance. But everything else had changed. Or maybe he had. A black SUV eased into the campus, and Malik stepped out wearing a tailored navy suit. Not flashy, but exact. No badge clipped to his belt. No need for clearance this time. This time, they were the ones asking to hear him speak. He was escorted through the main atrium, to a large auditorium that now bore a new name, the Systems Integrity Hall. A brass plaque outside the glass doors bore an inscription etched in perfect serif font, in honor of those who fought to be seen, even while building what others refused to. Inside, hundreds of people sat in rows. Staff, executives, students, interns, dozens of interns, of every race, gender, ability. Many wore black hoodies emblazoned with Malik's signature telemetry loop, from the Mars rover code, a symbol now known across engineering campuses as the Dawson Curve. A stage had been prepared. A large screen projected his image beside the words, "Engineer, Leader, Architect of Mission-Critical Change." Malik stepped up to the podium slowly, not out of nerves, but because he was taking it all in. The place where he was once mistaken for a janitor, where his badge stopped working, where his seat was filled by someone wearing his name. Now the very air in the room waited for his voice. He looked down at his speech, then folded it, placed it gently beside him. "I won't take long," he said, his voice calm, measured. "Because this isn't a speech. This is a reflection." The room quieted further. "I was told once by someone who'd already survived this place that they wouldn't see me until I saved them, or sued them. I didn't do either. I just wrote good code. Code that worked when theirs didn't. Code they buried until they couldn't afford to ignore it." He paused, eyes scanning the crowd. "I came in through a door they didn't expect me to open, and I was treated like a guest in a home I helped build." Murmurs in the back. Some heads lowered, but most just listened. "I want to say this clearly," he continued. "I didn't win. The system lost its grip, for a moment, and I used that moment." He gestured to the screen behind him. It now displayed a scrolling list, names of interns and engineers whose work had once been buried. each name paired with the project they helped build, restored from internal files he had personally verified and pushed to public record. Not just Elijah Green, not just himself, but dozens of others. This is what silence costs, Malik said. Not just opportunity, but legacy. He ended there. No rallying cry. No punchline. Just silence. But it was the kind of silence that rippled. When he stepped off the stage, the crowd stood. No applause at first. Just reverence. Then a slow build, claps echoing off walls that had once swallowed voices whole. In the front row, a man rose to his feet last. Gray coveralls. Weathered face. The same man who once pushed a mop across Malik's first late night at JPL. Reggie.
They locked eyes.
Malik stepped off the stage and walked straight to him. No cameras, no handshake for the crowd. Just two men who had both survived the architecture of erasure, and were still standing. You remember what I told you? Reggie asked, voice low. Malik nodded. They don't see us until we save them, or sue them. Reggie smiled, half proud, half sad. You did both. They shook hands. This time, equal. This time, documented. Later that evening, Malik visited the main lobby where a new installation had been unveiled. It was modest, a silver wall embedded with data points, telemetry arcs, equations that had saved billions of dollars in spaceflight failures. At the center was a simple engraving. Malik Dawson, engineer, mentor, architect of redundancy recovery protocols, telemetry integrity division, Mars recovery project. The system failed. I didn't. He stood there alone for a while, watching others stop, read, take pictures. A young girl barely in high school walked up beside him. She wore a hijab and carried a physics textbook under one arm. That's you? She asked, pointing at the name. He nodded. She smiled. They told us you almost didn't make it. Malik turned toward her, offering the kind of smile that doesn't hide history. I did, he said, but not quietly. Days later, a closed-door congressional session opened with Malik's testimony. He submitted his files. Clean, dated, damning. Not to destroy careers, but to protect future. Because he understood now that systems don't collapse from exposure. They adapt when adaptation becomes the only option. Final reflection. As Malik sat by his window that night, miles away from JPL, beyond the noise of the media, beyond the walls that once tried to shrink him, he looked up. The stars above California blinked steady, distant, indifferent, and yet, they felt closer than ever. He thought about Elijah. He thought about Kendra. He thought about Reggie, and all the others who had passed through glass halls leaving no trace, brilliance filed under someone else's name. He had asked himself 1,000 times during those early days, am I good enough? But now, as his name orbited Mars in the systems that ran on his math, he realized the question was never about worth. It was about who was allowed to claim it. And what if he had stayed silent? How many more systems would still run on stolen brilliance? His name had been written in the stars, but he made sure it couldn't be erased this time. How many more names have been erased before they ever had a chance to be remembered? If you've ever been overlooked, silenced, or stolen from, you're not alone. Type yes if you believe the truth should never be buried. Subscribe if this story broke your